Hey everybody, Daniel here again. New video here is going to be a little different than the other ones. No real debunking or anything like that going on. I wanted to talk about the case with the Hobby Lobby issue and the Affordable Care Act, which is kind of horribly named, but whatever. There's a lot of hubbub going around, and a lot of people are making a lot of different arguments about what the law is, what the law ought to be, whether or not companies should be made to cover birth control in the insurance packages based on religious views or other views, for whatever reason. And I think those are covered pretty well. I'll probably stick a link here someplace to Lee Doran's video where he's making one particular argument about it. But I don't really want to cover any of that because I think that's pretty well covered overall. My issue, or at least the thing that is a little bit confusing for me, is kind of the wording of the issue, but more importantly, the emotion behind the problem. See, because I'm not 4 years old, I remember a time before the Affordable Care Act was really much of a thing. Specifically, there used to be no outcry at all for employers purchasing insurance to cover birth control at all. I remember this very clearly because I was alive at the time. See, I'm 31 years old, and I remember that no one was going around angry at Hobby Lobby for not having been covering birth control. And there's probably a few reasons for this, mostly because birth control is, for the most part, extremely cheap. And very, very high-level access to it. Cough syrup and Advil are slightly easier to come by. And on the whole, pretty close to the same price. There are, yes, some that are $50 to $60 to $80 per month if you really want those particular types and the prescriptions that you have to get them. I understand that. And there are medical reasons for those. That's true. But the thing is that, say a decade ago, no one was angry and, no one was lobbying Congress about it. No one was filing lawsuits. And no one really cared that I could go to work for Hobby Lobby and not have birth control covered for me or my spouse or anybody else. And just what I find amazing about this whole thing, purely sociologically, is how one law was passed, a really long law, granted, but one law nonetheless was passed, which suddenly influenced the opinions of literally millions of Americans to suddenly view birth control as a part of healthcare, which arguably it can be. I wouldn't call condoms a part of healthcare, for instance, but whatever. And then healthcare as a basic human right. It's no such of a thing, but I won't argue that here. You don't have the right to anything unto itself. You have the right to procure things through labor. That's logical. And because it's a basic human right, then therefore we should be able to make all insurance coverage cover it. No part of that actually follows from any previous part of it. But more importantly, again, what strikes me as really weird here is that people are really angry about this, which before did not exist. Again, a decade ago, no one cared that Hobby Lobby didn't cover birth control, except at most few Hobby Lobby employees who, because there was no law saying that they had any right to it one way or the other, just went and bought it. Or didn't. They could get supplementary insurance, or they could just pay for it out of pocket. That was their option. And that's what they signed up for when they worked for Hobby Lobby. They knew what their coverage was. Or they should have. Whether people actually read their employment agreements or benefits packages that are being offered at the time or not, I have no idea. That's neither here nor there. If you don't read a contract and you sign it, you're stupid. Or lazy. Or some combination thereof. That's not my problem. Or anybody else's. That's just only yours. But you're supposed to. You're supposed to know what you're getting into for an employee relationship. And most people did, and they didn't have a big problem with it. At most, there were a few tableside complaints. At the most. And a law came along, and now people feel entitled to reap the benefits of the law. And now they're really emotional about this. Me personally, I don't care. I live in Canada now. I'm a U.S. citizen. I'm living abroad. I'm going to be living abroad for the foreseeable future. I would like to return to the U.S. probably eventually one day if that ever becomes feasible. But not if people are going to be silly about this kind of stuff on this level and just keep getting sillier. Canadians, by the way, for the most part, think this is ridiculous. Saskatchewan health law doesn't cover any form of birth control whatsoever. My wife was on the shot. We just paid for that. That was our choice. There was nothing like a law saying that someone had to provide that for us on any level. We just paid for that. That's not included in their health care. And no one here is angry about that at all. They're like, well, yeah, of course. Why would it be otherwise? That's my choice if I want to go on some particular form of birth control. And again, it might be different if your doctor says that this is medically necessary and all that. And I don't see why the ACA can't be amended to say precisely that. If a doctor says, hey, this is medically necessary for a variety of diseases. There are a few conditions which women can go through that hormonal treatment, which also serves as birth control, or is a very effective means for controlling that issue. I don't know why it can't be amended to say, well, it must be covered in this case, but no other. And then otherwise it's optional. I don't know why that can't be a thing. I guess because it was made by a bunch of government bureaucrats that not only swing with large hammers, but do so often with everything. They have to swing a lot with a big hammer. There's no finesse when it comes to federal law. But be that as it may. It's the opinions on this are wildly differing, and they should be. But the language that's being used of religious people are trying to oppress, women's rights and all manners of nonsense like that. It is asinine. I don't understand any level of that kind of discourse. There are a few people on the other side who are making some pretty outrageous statements too, so don't misunderstand me there. But no, it's just bizarre that one law can have this kind of effect. Which, by the way, one of my many reasons I'm a libertarian. I don't like making new laws to make society better. I just want to protect their rights. That's it. Provide courts, cops, military, maybe basic infrastructure at most, and otherwise pretty much let people do whatever they want, as long as they're not hurting anybody. Because otherwise you get nonsense like this. You pass a law that says you can't do something, and all of a sudden all of society's opinion on this thing changes drastically, whereas before it wouldn't. And that is just awful, I think. Absolutely horrible. And it kind of comes backwards too. Some people are kind of comparing this to like a civil liberties kind of issue, which I also think is nonsense. But the civil liberties stuff, really, that was a matter of winning hearts and minds, kind of as the laws were being passed, and decades of doing that before it really came to any sort of real law. Even then. And I'm not saying that necessarily has to always be the case. Just because people don't like it doesn't mean it shouldn't be illegal or whatever. But yeah, it's bizarre how there were no articles written by anybody in the news, no news reports whatsoever on any level, claiming that men and women working for people who weren't covering their birth control were being abused. And for some reason now suddenly that seems to be the kind of the modus operandi. And that's really sad. That people's view of reality can be altered that drastically, that quickly, by something so arbitrary as a federal mandate.